Let's talk about a 6-step process. Let's talk about a 6-step process that you can take to release negative emotions. So, this is going to be deep. You're going to find a lot of these emotional development techniques and modalities online, but this is not what we're talking about here. We're talking about something that gets at the root of the issue. And so most of us are motivated by the desire to escape pain and suffering, right? We all have painful emotional emotions that we don't want to feel. Maybe it's awkwardness, shyness, anxiety, depression, pride. Maybe it's fear, anger, self-doubt, nervousness. These are all unpleasant states to be in. I don't know about you, but I don't like feeling anxious. Um, and so what we're going to explore here is what is the 6 steps to actually release these and to become conscious of the root of them. Well, before we go into that, I want to talk about why is it that these arise in the first place. Uh, and basically, we get caught in these states because we have an assumption about ourselves, such as I am not enough, I'm worthless, something is wrong with me, I am wrong, that triggers this emotional state to be experienced in the first place. These are the assumptions that are at the root of our experience. The whole gamut of our emotions arise out of these. So because these are what are generating the emotions, just trying to feel better doesn't change the root assumption. To truly transform ourselves into a new identity where we're not experiencing as much of these negative emotions and we're working through and processing them is being able to see the assumption clearly. It's a capacity that we develop. We develop the skill of being able to see the assumptions clearly such that we can become so conscious of it that it gets let go or that it doesn't even arise in the first place. This experience where we're conscious of it is an experience of freedom. This is why spiritual teachers say that freedom is the goal of spiritual practice. Freedom from these attachments, from these assumptions that we have about ourselves. This is what it feels like to overcome suffering because these emotions are inherently constricting. They're the opposite of freedom. So let's dive into the process. So when you experience a negative emotion, the first step is to take it. The first step is take a step back, be in a silent space with yourself. And step two is fully be with the suffering of it. Be with the experience of suffering that comes along with the negative emotion and start to see that there's nothing inherently wrong with this experience. Because you are suffering, because you are experiencing emotional pain, does not imply that anything is fundamentally wrong about you as a human being. So the first step, and so this step involves validating the experience. It's it by validating it releases a tinge of the shame that we may feel around it. Step three is to start inquiring into it. You do this by asking these questions. What assumption do I have about myself that makes this emotion, this painful experience, seem like the only valid way to be? You can also ask, what is underneath this emotion? What am I attached to that is making this experience feel wrong or not enough? Step four is you sit with these questions for at least 30 minutes. You really get curious about this painful emotional experience. If it's anxiety, be like, what is underneath this anxiety? What is it that I am attached to such that it feels like I need to be anxious? Step five is you can write these out on a piece of paper. After you've asked the questions, a lot of times we'll get distracted. There will be a million things that our mind will want to do other than sit with them. So to write the questions on a piece of paper and then to write bullet points of the assumptions, the stories, the things that the insights that we have after asking the question, this can be really helpful. Your mind might want to go for a walk, watch a YouTube video, do anything other than sit with the inquiry process. And so, therefore, step six is to just continue doing this process over and over again. And as I've talked about in previous videos, the best time to do this is when you're triggered. If you're not triggered, it's going to be harder to find what the root assumptions are. But if you're in one of these painful negative emotions and you're triggered, this means that one of these assumptions, one of these core bottom line beliefs that you have about yourself is activated. That means it's going to be easier to find because it's flaring up. And so as you continue to do this process over and over again, what will change is that you'll be more quick to notice when this core assumption is causing you to feel suffering. It will be more easy to let go of it when it's flaring up because it's more easy to become conscious of it when it's flaring up. The more that you do this process throughout your life, the more you'll move and inhabit a space where it doesn't feel like you need to uphold these beliefs, where there will be an experience of greater freedom. The connection here is that the experience of struggling, of feeling trapped, of suffering is based on these core assumptions. So when we see through these core assumptions, we become conscious of them and let them go, we inherently have less struggle in our life. The ultimate goal of this process is to see through them enough such that we see that there actually is no self behind them at all. This is the essence of the spiritual process. But before we go that deep, let's just start with this 6-step process of seeing the nature of them. So as you begin to do this process, you will start to experience the relationship between that attachment and the suffering that you feel. You'll start noticing that the negative emotions that you experience are directly related to these attachments and beliefs that you have about yourself, which means that once you see that relationship and once you see that you're choosing to have that story, to maintain that story, once you see that you're the one that is creating the suffering, you're the one that is creating the attachment or maintaining the attachment, you will also inevitably release that attachment, because why would you want to unnecessarily suffer? And so the only reason that we suffer inherently is because we don't understand fully how our mind works. We haven't made it to what Corey Katuna, who I recently interviewed, calls the choice point, the point where you see that sustaining the attachment to the belief is a choice. Until you hit that point, the suffering feels inescapable. It feels constricting, and like you're at the mercy of it rather than being the one that is choosing the attachment. The point here isn't that we should embrace suffering in a masochistic way, but that we should try to grasp how we're generating our suffering in the first place. The goal is to uncover why it feels like suffering is needing, because for most of us, it feels that in order to survive, we must suffer. We inherently intertwine our survival with the experience of suffering, such that to stop suffering feels like a survival risk. And at the end of the day, pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. We can start to see suffering less as a burden, more as an opportunity, because the moments when we're suffering are the moments that we are most primed to have deepest self-awareness and insights into the essence of that suffering. So this is the whole point of this process. If you go through this 6-step process over and over again, the goal is to deepen your inquiry, deepen your consciousness, deepen your understanding of these attachments. And then as you go forward in your life, the attachments won't rule you as much. And therefore, you won't experience as intense of these negative emotional states. So I can't underscore how profound and revolutionary this is. In my life, I've been really seriously doing this investigation for about a month now. And one of the best times that I found to do it is after I get home from a night out. If I go out with friends, if I go do an activity, I'm playing a lot of volleyball lately. After I have a volleyball, or I finish playing volleyball with people, or after I go out on a date, or after I uh, hang out with friends in a park. A lot of times, these negative emotional experiences will be present. And so, whenever I get back from that, is like the perfect time to explore them. So, whenever I go out, about a week ago, I went out with friends and I was feeling really self conscious, awkward. I was just feeling a lot of these negative emotions and they lasted the whole night. Then, as I got back, I did this process. I inquired into them. And what was underneath them was this feeling that I was wrong, that something was wrong with me. So I became conscious of how this emotional experience was arising from this feeling of something being wrong with me. And so, as I became conscious of it, the emotion of self consciousness and awkwardness dissipated because I was seeing it clearly. And I was seeing that I was actually choosing to believe that there was something wrong with me. And I believe that you can do the same thing in your life. This 6 step process, I just made it up. I've been going through this process and I just broke it into 6 distinguished steps. But as you get better at it, you can just start doing it in all sorts of moments in your life. Whenever you get triggered, this can become an automatic practice such that over time, the degree of freedom and spaciousness that you feel is unmatched, and life just becomes really enjoyable. I'm still doing this process myself. I have not mastered this. I am still in these states. These core assumptions are still ruling my life in so many ways. This feeling of being wrong, of being not enough, are still present every single day. There's not a day when these are not triggered in my life in some way. But at the same time, I'm noticing some major transformative shifts in my life because of the intention to do this as regularly as possible. And I will end it off with a side note, which is that a lot of times we can almost purposefully trigger these by trying to inhabit a space that doesn't feel natural. So if our natural state is one in which we feel depressed, shy, anxious, awkward, small, weak, etc., what we can do in order to transform ourselves into someone that is confident, powerful, sure of ourselves, not shy, not awkward, comfortable in social situations. What we can do is we can try to inhabit that space and then notice all the things that are stopping us from doing so. So when I try to show up in a more confident, more convicted, more natural way, more flowing way in groups of people, it will feel so unnatural and everything in my being wants me to stop doing it. And that is also when I said earlier in the video, when I said that being triggered is an opportunity to feel the suffering of these experiences is when we're most primed for self-awareness. This is what I meant. When I try to inhabit a different identity and it feels weird and not quite right, I can investigate why it feels so hard to inhabit a space of confidence. And I can start to notice how these core beliefs and these assumptions that I have about myself are the very thing that are stopping me from being in a new identity, because some part of me feels that in order to survive, I need to be in this small identity. I need to be in this certain way of existing, which is not true whatsoever. And so actually doubting that part that is attributing my survival with staying small and weak, that is the process. And that is inherently the same as the process of inquiring and investigating core beliefs and core assumptions. I'm going to be making many more podcast episodes and videos about this in the future because this is something I'm super passionate about that I've been really exploring in my life lately. So stay tuned for that.